I mean, if you think about it and you imagine money, and so anybody listening to this now and you say, okay, draw me a mental picture of money, people still generally think of notes and coins or even gold, whereas of course 98% of money in circulation in Britain today, and I think the figure is very similar in Germany or even higher in a country like Sweden. The vast majority of money in circulation doesn't take the form of notes and coins, it takes the form of claims made through the banking system and often mediated by plastic cards of one form or another. So once you start thinking of money in more abstract terms and you start thinking it's not just notes and coins, it's actually just a series of claims, then you begin to understand that money has a kind of dynamic quality, and it's more like a verb than a noun actually. That money is actually just a series of claims that move between people. This sort of weather, cloudy but light, appreciate the sun is out there somewhere. I would at home be able to run my washing machine of the power that you get off the roof at this time. Solar is not just about PV, solar energy produces the wind as well and produces the biogas that can provide the backup to both wind and PV. Even at night time, all my electricity at home is solar. My lights haven't gone off in last 2 years that I'll have been having my supply from them. PV provides power when we need it most. It peaks, as we all know, about midday when the sun is highest in the sky, and that's actually when the demand for electricity is at its most when we are cooking lunch, and in Germany they have shown that it not only peaks at the right time but the PV power follows the shape of demand. At the moment in Germany around noon at time of peak demand when electricity is actually most expensive, the PV that they get has reduced the price, the wholesale price of electricity on the grid considerably. So we walked up to north side of the square. What is it in particular that takes your interest here? Well, I wanted to show you the bust above the entrance doorway. This is where the students of the Courtauld Institute of Arts come, and on the other side of course visitors to the Courtauld Gallery will go in there, and I'm guessing they don't look up to see this interesting bust. You probably can't recognize who it is supposed to be. No idea actually. Well, it is the great English scientist Isaac Newton. The reason that he is here is because this part of Somerset House, which is called the Strand Block, when it was built from the 1770s through to the 1790s, it was purpose-built to be the home of 3 learned societies. They were the Royal Society, the Society of Antiquaries, so they were essentially historians, and the Royal Academy of Arts, which was just a very new organization just a few years old at the time, which looked after architecture, sculpture and painting. The Royal Society were housed on this side, and that's why they chose Isaac Newton, who had been dead for about 50 years by then. Again, still in the interest of recapping, this particular game is called The Prisoner's Dilemma. It's written there, The Prisoner's Dilemma. Notice, it's prisoners, plural. And we mentioned some examples last time. Let me just reiterate and mention some more examples which are actually written here, so they'll find their way into your notes. So, for example, if you have a joint project that you're working on, perhaps it's a homework assignment, or perhaps it's a video project like these guys, that can turn into a prisoner's dilemma. Why? Because each individual might have an incentive to shirk. Price competition, 2 firms competing with one another in prices, can have a prisoner's dilemma aspect about it. Why? Because no matter how the other firm, your competitor, prices, you might have an incentive to undercut them. If both firms behave that way, prices will get driven down towards marginal cost and industry profits will suffer. In first case, everyone shirks, you end up with a bad product. In the second case, if both the good consumers but firms undercut each other, you end up with low prices. That's actually for let me mention a third example. Suppose there's a common resource out there bad for firms. Maybe it's a fish stock or maybe it's the atmosphere. There's a prisoner's dilemma aspect to this too. So I have to confess that like this story a lot, but I actually like drama on a smaller scale. So Bernice bobs her hair is actually my favorite story among the Fitzgerald stories. And I hope that you'll see why. It's about reversion to an original type and an unknown future. Fitzgerald, L. think, really liked the story as well. This is the story that is featured on the cover of the collection of short stories Flappers and Philosophers. And if the word flapper, if that doesn't ring a bell right away, this is an image of the very famous flappers of the 1920s, people who bob their hair and wear short skirts, show their legs, and so on. The flappers. You guys know that the story is really about someone who's becoming a flapper. Bernice she has, in fact, cut off all her beautiful hair, tons and tons of hair, has it cut off. But it turns out that that's exactly the wrong hairdo for her. She's ugly as sin after that, and her beaux stop, her beaux lose all interest in her. And she has one person to thank, her cousin. Now, while this development was taking place, we need to take a look at what was happening back in the Greek world on the mainland, and chiefly I think we should focus on Athens at this time. There was right after the Persian War, as I said a few words about it before, a rising competition for a place of standing in the Greek world. That is to say, before the Persian Wars were over, Sparta had been unquestionably the leader of the Greeks, when challenged by an outside force. After the war, Themistocles, you recall, and obviously with the Athenians at his back, asserted at the very least equality with the Spartans, and certainly independence of any position following the Spartans or any grant of leadership to the Spartans. As Think L mentioned last time, the next 50 years or so are the story of the competition between these two great powers within the Greek world for who would be the leader, and there would be many a clash in the course of that time. So, the first concept and the easiest way, I think, to understand black holes is the concept of the escape velocity. This is a piece of high school physics. Some of you may have encountered it before. And it just means how fast you have to go to escape from the gravitational field a given of object. If you go outside and you shoot up a rocket ship or something like that, how fast do you have to shoot it that it doesn't fall back to the Earth? And so, you can define an escape velocity for the Earth, or for any other object for that matter, which is just how fast you have to go to escape its gravitational field. So Irving Fisher, remember, he cleared up the confusion of what interest was. He said interest is crystallized impatience. It's not some horribly unjust thing. It's not, as Marx thought, exploitation, but Shakespeare had discovered all this 300 years before. Now, when was your age or a little bit younger than you in high school? We all had to read The Merchant of Venice. I have two Indian co-authors who are vaguely my age, maybe a little older, but anyway they sort of grew up in India and they had to learn The Merchant of Venice, and actually, they learned it a lot better than Elle did. They both have memorized The Merchant of Venice. They can recite almost the entire thing by heart. But anyway, when I was in high school it was completely typical to study The Merchant of Venice. Wonder how many of you have actually read it. Who's read The Merchant of Venice? Ooh, this is Yale, I'm shocked. So a quarter of you have read it. Well, I recommend to the other 3/4 that you do read it. But the way the play is read now, that's the whole story, and I don't think it's the whole story. In fact, I think it's quite an unimportant part of the story. I think the heart of the story is Shakespeare's commentary on economics. And so I'm going to try and argue in the next 10 minutes that Shakespeare was not only a great writer, a great psychologist, but a great economist.
Hello, Professor Robert. What is your topic of discussion on this forum today?
Thank you, George. Today I would like to talk about the performance of India in achieving the Millennium Development Goals, MDGs. One of the striking features of MDGs, Millennium Development Goals, is that the global community came together to address the development agenda and created 8 indicators which were measurable in terms of their outcomes. In absolute numbers, some fantastic work has been accomplished by MDGs. MDGs have not only pulled a large number of people out of extreme poverty but also addressed many of the health issues like child mortality and infant mortality. In spite of all the achievements, we still need to do more. Hunger, to my mind, is violence against humanity and must be eliminated urgently. It is undignified for a nation like India to let mothers die while they give birth to a child or let our citizens defecate in the open.
Do you think that India has neglected education at the basic level?
We have not been able to achieve a desirable outcome with respect to investment in primary education. There is an urgent need to think about improving the quality of education at the primary level, and merely achieving 100% primary school enrollment is not sufficient.
How are girls and women integral to India's development?
I am a very strong proponent of rights and well-being of the girl child and women. It's a very harsh reality that women carry out 60% of work burden but only own 1% of the property. If you educate a girl child, she will educate her entire family. Educating girl child has a multiplier effect on society.
So, the first concept and the easiest way, I think, to understand black holes is the concept of the escape velocity. This is a piece of high school physics. Some of you may have encountered it before. And it just means how fast you have to go to escape from the gravitational field a given of object. If you go outside and you shoot up a rocket ship or something like that, how fast do you have to shoot it that it doesn't fall back to the Earth? And so, you can define an escape velocity for the Earth, or for any other object for that matter, which is just how fast you have to go to escape its gravitational field.